Hey guys, and welcome to another brand new video. In this video, we actually have some of the kind of craziest conversations we've had a chance to go and cover of the PlayStation and Sony, also Nintendo Omega merge. Now, you guys have heard me correctly over this. Every now and then we get to see these kind of very intriguing articles and speculations and kind of like what ifs and what would kind of actually go and happen in terms of all these companies and people's thoughts and all of that. And now this is one of those things where we see this, we read this, and we're kind of thinking, this is probably the stupidest thing I think I've ever read, but on top of that, what if it actually went and happened, and what would actually kind of be coming out with that, and how would basically even Xbox and all these other various companies go and even handle the situation? So I want to go and highlight this and show this because we actually have some very intriguing numbers and kind of showing up all their overall like market caps and everything else too with it too as well, because there's just a big gaming industry. Gaming as a whole is worth billions upon billions of dollars, and Nintendo and Sony are, well, obviously a part of that. But we have some kind of funny and kind of weird articles to show too, so give me your thoughts and comments down below for this nice little brain theory going on with the megacorp of Sony and PlayStation. As well, if any of you guys are brand new, make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on. As well, for the brand new PlayStation 5 giveaway, Amazon links down below, Target links down below, and giveaway links down below, and let's dive into the video. So as I mentioned, sometimes we get these kind of crazy things where we're having folks out here bringing this stuff on up, where they're stating and people are pushing for Sony PlayStation to go and literally buy Nintendo, quote unquote, before someone else does as a reader's feature. Now, I want to throw into some very intriguing numbers too as well when it comes to Activision, Microsoft, Sony, and all that, which we'll get to in a second. But in theory, someone like Microsoft actually could go buy out a company, let's say PlayStation or Nintendo, from all the actual like capital they actually have. Now, is that going to ever happen? No, probably not. Like, same thing with Apple, maybe buying anything like Sony or, all this for Nintendo or whatever. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of regulation and laws behind that. But as well, this reader's trying to go push for the combined Sony and Nintendo megacorp to go take over the gaming world to compete with Microsoft and other tech giants such as Google and Apple. Now, I'm kind of giggling on this too because the idea is just very far-fetched, both on the regulation side, but as well as also just would it actually work? So let's go talk about it. So we've all had a good laugh at Google admitting that it's shutting down their streaming service Stadia. But to be honest, it's news that worries me greatly. While they were wasting time with that, they were no threat to gaming, but now that they've stopped, my concern is at what they're going to do next. Gaming is a big enough business that they aren't going to just go and ignore it because of one setback. No, they're going to do more obvious and far more destructive things of like buying up companies that have managed to do what they could not. So Google and Microsoft are two of the biggest companies in the world, so there really is no limit on who they could buy. Money isn't a question, and I'm sure monopoly investigators aren't going to be either. If a company doesn't want to be bought, that will slow things down, but hostile takeovers are totally a thing, so it's not going to stop them for long. So also when Amazon's Luna service fails, if not already assumed to have, they're likely to be in the same manner, just like what they did when they bought Twitch. If Google does it first, they'll only be more incentivized, which will probably draw on Apple too, and who knows how many other companies. Gaming, as we know, will be chopped up and sold as commodities to companies that neither know nor care anything about their products they make. And that already kind of sounds like Twitch, as you guys know. I am a Twitch streamer, but ever since Amazon bought Twitch for around $1 billion, it does kind of seem like they're just trying to go and put as many ads as they possibly can, and will basically kill off the platform. So the trend is already all on its way, with Microsoft already poised to make Call of Duty an exclusive in the shortest amount of time possible based on the half-truths and vague promises they've given the world's various governments, which in all honesty is like kind of the critique I keep on giving, because yeah, you can maybe go give Call of Duty for 2 or 3 years, but at the end of the day, well, if that's after 2 or 3 years, then they're never going to get it ever again. Other publishers are just sitting waiting for it to be their turn, with once proud companies like EA, Ubisoft, and Take-Two practically begging to be bought up, so their execs can add a few more zeros to their bank account balances too as well. Which in all honesty, though, that's kind of true. I don't think Take-Two is, I think that's a pretty strong component, and I think it's almost like a league higher than every other company. But if you're looking at EA or Ubisoft, I think they have both publicly went on record stating we would not mind being bought out. Like whether it's from Sony buying EA or like Nintendo buying Ubisoft or whatever it may be, they have actually been very open with these policies too as well. Many have noted that this sort of thing doesn't tend to happen with Japanese companies, and there is a misapprehension that it's impossible for a foreign company to buy a Japanese one. That is not true. There might be a bit more red tape, but it happens all the time, and there's no law against it. What does tend to happen with Japanese companies, though, is that they usually merge with others. This kind of goes and stems to their kind of crazy fiasco over here, saying that Sony and Nintendo should go and merge. So this is in order to avoid an unwanted takeover. It's not ideal, but it's better than just being bought up as an impulse purchase by some uncaring multinational. So that's why so many Japanese companies have double-barreled names: Bandai Namco, Koei Tenko, Spike Chunsoft, Sega Sammy, and even Square Enix, all were one single companies before merging into a giant one too as well. My headline has obviously given away what I'm getting at here, but I strongly believe that Sony and Nintendo should be next. Whether they merge or Sony buys Nintendo, as happened with Sega Sammy, when one company was much bigger than the other, isn't really important. What does matter, though, is that these two companies are just strongly invested in and fully understand games and won't just end up as the 49th most important subsidiary of Google or Apple. Which is kind of a crazy thought, because could you guys imagine a megacorp of basically all Nintendo games? So like Zelda games, Mario games, Samus games, like all that type of stuff, Metroid Prime games, all showing up over here on PlayStation. Now that would probably break the internet nonetheless, especially if they put it up on PC, and they probably would print a lot of money, especially if they had one division focusing on mobile, such as like their Switch Pro, while you have the like big mainstream PlayStation 5, maintaining up all the indie games and other big AAA games. Now, an intriguing thing to kind of know is because Sony stock, if you go look at Sony stock, they make some pretty good money. Like, they're actually a pretty all-around good, proper company too as well, with their stock doing pretty good with around an $83 billion market cap. But this is also why it's such a huge league outside of Microsoft. If you go look at Microsoft, Microsoft's market cap is $1.75 billion. That is insane. That is insane with like $168 billion in USD. Now, obviously, though, Xbox is a subsidiary of, Microsoft too as well, but it is a pretty big relevant part to it. But on top of that too as well, we also have Sony that's also selling other stuff like TVs and phones, but as well, I think a lot more folks are probably realizing that PlayStation is probably one of the bigger parts over here from, Sony. So in theory, with an $83 billion market cap, and this is why we always kind of find this stuff kind of crazy, because if you guys look at Activision, Activision's stock itself, it is just an absolutely huge market cap too as well. As of right now, it's a $57.38 billion market cap, which kind of goes to show why it's getting so much government scrutiny. If you go look at Nintendo, it's basically worth 7.8 trillion, Japanese currency, which is also equivalent out to around $54 billion in the United States dollar. So in the same amount of money that Microsoft spent on Activision, they could unironically, and as well, the Activision stock price, I believe, is a little bit higher too as well. So like the current stock price is lower because there's still like skepticism on the actual buyout itself. So as you go look through all this type of stuff, you can go and see that they literally could have bought Nintendo. And as well, they almost could have bought Sony too as well, like just in terms of the overall profits and money that they put into. Now, obviously, this was actually a few months back, and the Sony stock price was actually worth a decent bit more back around like when these first things were coming out. So probably around a $100 billion company. So, but as well, like monopoly laws would 100% have never allowed that ever. But that's why it's kind of crazy, because there actually would be maybe a pretty good merit of Sony and Nintendo basically going and being merged together. Then make them like a $140 billion company, but as well, it'd also probably go and that'd probably be one of the biggest stock pumps I would ever see in my entire life of seeing these companies go and merge. Now, obviously, that's going to be very unlikely due to monopoly laws and just because the logistics. It's like if something like a Nintendo is a strong enough company as is, and they have enough of their long-term profitability and growth as well, where they don't really need to merge with a company. Now, if they wanted to, they could, but like I said, is it really worth it? No, because you're just doing your own thing and you can keep on growing and expanding in your own same way. As we're seeing stuff with like Nintendo theme parks, Nintendo movies, the Mario movie, and also just the Switch and mobile games and all of that. So they don't need to merge. Like, they're doing fine. Like, these businesses are printing a lot of money. They're net positive on the revenues. They're net positive on incomes. They're expanding. They have new features. Look at Sony features with like movies as well, with music for like, TVs. So like, they don't necessarily need to go and merge. But that's why it'd be kind of crazy to see this in the gaming world. As well, it's also kind of even crazier to think about Microsoft. Like, what if Microsoft, instead of buying Activision, which is, in theory, Activision is going to be making a lot of money, what if they just said whatever and they bought Nintendo too as well? So it's kind of crazy, because this article, although obviously Troll is just saying how like there's not really that much crossover in terms of tax and exclusives, although a lot of indie game crossover, but they're like, bro, we got things like Pokemon and Pokemon merch, and you got Sony selling TVs. Like, why not just go sell like Pokemon TVs? You can make a lot of money working together and merging their companies. So do I think this is going to happen? Obviously not. Like, this is like a reader feature and just kind of doing some kind of crazy clickbait things. And even like people in the comments are like, yeah, they don't need to go and buy Nintendo, and Nintendo doesn't need to go and sell either two as well, because they're both successful, which I kind of agree, and long-term they will, and, regulatory things and all that type of stuff. But as well, they also did go bring up the fact that Sony was meant to actually work with Nintendo. We made a pretty in-depth video on this forever ago, on how they actually wanted to go and basically own and work with the original PlayStation 1 for Nintendo. So kind of a crazy, weird speculation video, so give me your thoughts and comments down below. And as well, make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on, and let me know what you guys would do if Microsoft bought Nintendo, or Sony bought Nintendo too. That's why we have the Twitter and Twitch stream down below, the Amazon links down below, Target links down below, and all the other very sellouts things too as well down below. And I appreciate you guys all so much for watching here in the first place.